The room fell silent in a way that felt heavier than words, the kind of silence that makes your chest tighten before anything bad even happens. Daniel Carter felt it immediately, the weight of something he couldn't yet understand. His fingers tightened around the worn folder in his hands, the edges softened from years of carrying it everywhere like a lifeline. He had been called into the executive office without warning. For a man like Daniel, that usually meant one thing: trouble. But what happened next was something he never could have imagined. Before we begin this story, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness if you believe the world still needs compassion and second chances. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because kindness connects people everywhere. Daniel Carter had never planned to be raising a child alone. 5 years earlier, his life had looked very different. He had a stable job as a warehouse supervisor, a small apartment filled with laughter, and a wife named Emily who believed that even the worst days could be fixed with patience and love. Then life shattered in a single night. A drunk driver, a red light, a hospital hallway that smelled like disinfectant and heartbreak. Emily never came home again. Daniel was left standing in the hospital corridor holding their 3-year-old daughter Lily while doctors spoke words that sounded distant and unreal. From that moment forward, his entire world became one promise. He would give Lily the life Emily would have wanted for her. But promises are hard to keep when life keeps pushing you down. Medical bills swallowed his savings. Childcare costs forced him to leave his old job. The apartment became too expensive. Within a year, Daniel had lost almost everything except the tiny hand that held his every night before bed. Eventually, he found work as a night janitor in a large corporate office building downtown. It wasn't glamorous. It barely paid the bills. But the night shift allowed him to take Lily to school in the morning and be home when she returned. So every evening, after tucking her into bed at his sister's house, Daniel would drive to the glass tower where hundreds of successful professionals worked during the day. At night, he cleaned up after them. He wiped fingerprints from conference tables, emptied trash bins filled with half-finished lunches, polished floors so bright they reflected the ceiling lights. Most employees never noticed him, but Daniel noticed everything. He noticed the exhaustion of young workers trying to prove themselves, the quiet arguments between coworkers, the forgotten coffee cups left behind after long meetings. Sometimes he would pause in the massive executive conference room and stare at the city lights outside the windows. It felt like looking into a world that belonged to someone else. Still, he never complained, because every morning Lily would run into his arms shouting, "Daddy!" and that made every long night worth it. One evening, something unusual happened. Daniel had just finished cleaning the 22nd floor when he heard voices coming from the executive office area. Normally, that part of the building was empty at night, but the CEO, Marcus Reynolds, was still there. Marcus Reynolds was the kind of man people whispered about in hallways. He had built the company into a billion-dollar corporation before the age of 40. His decisions moved markets. His schedule was packed weeks in advance. People rarely saw him up close. As Daniel quietly pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway, he noticed the CEO standing alone by the window inside his office. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Daniel quickly looked away and kept walking. But something about that moment lingered. The next night, it happened again, and the night after that. Marcus Reynolds seemed to be working late every evening, and each time he passed through the hallway, he nodded politely at Daniel. It was a small gesture, but more acknowledgement than Daniel usually received from anyone in the building. Then one night, Marcus noticed something unexpected. Daniel's daughter. It had been a difficult evening. Daniel's sister had gotten sick, and there was no one to watch Lily. Missing work wasn't an option. He needed every dollar, so he brought her with him. Lily sat quietly in a corner of the empty office floor coloring in a small notebook while Daniel worked. She had a tiny backpack filled with crayons and snacks. When Marcus walked out of his office and saw the little girl sitting there, he stopped. Lily looked up at the tall stranger in the expensive suit and smiled shyly. Daniel immediately rushed over, apologizing, explaining the situation, promising it wouldn't happen again. Marcus simply looked at the two of them for a long moment, then he nodded and walked away. Daniel thought that was the end of it, but the next morning something unexpected happened. Instead of heading straight to work like usual, Daniel received a message from building security. The CEO wanted to see him. Now Daniel sat across from Marcus Reynolds in the executive conference room, his heart pounding. This was it. He was going to be fired. He imagined Lily asking why he was home so early, Imagine the bills piling up again. Imagine the slow collapse of the fragile life he had worked so hard to rebuild. Marcus finally leaned forward. "We need to talk." Daniel braced himself. But instead of anger, Marcus's voice carried something else: curiosity. Over the past few weeks, Marcus explained, he had noticed Daniel working late every night. He had noticed how carefully he cleaned every room, how he straightened chairs others didn't even notice were crooked. And then he saw Lily. That changed something. Marcus admitted something he rarely told anyone. He had grown up poor, too. His mother worked 3 jobs. His father had left when he was young. There were nights when the electricity went out because bills couldn't be paid. The only reason Marcus had escaped that life was because one person had taken a chance on him, a mentor, someone who looked past his circumstances and saw potential. Now Marcus studied Daniel carefully, because he saw something familiar: responsibility, quiet determination, a father who refused to give up. Marcus had done some research. Before becoming a janitor, Daniel had managed warehouse operations for a logistics company. His records showed years of strong performance and leadership experience. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Why are you cleaning floors instead of managing people?" he asked. Daniel didn't have a dramatic answer. Life had simply happened. And sometimes life pushes good people off the path they were meant to walk. The CEO sat quietly for a long moment. Then he said something that made Daniel's mind go completely blank. The company's logistics department needed a new operations supervisor, someone reliable, someone hard-working, someone who understood responsibility. Marcus slid a folder across the table. Inside was a job offer, a real one, full salary, benefits, daytime hours. Daniel stared at the paper, certain he must be misunderstanding something. Marcus spoke again. "This isn't charity," he said calmly. "It's an opportunity, the kind someone once gave him." For several seconds, Daniel couldn't speak. His entire life had been about surviving one day at a time. Hope had become something distant, something other people experienced. But now it sat in front of him on a piece of paper, all because someone had chosen to see him. Tears filled Daniel's eyes as he whispered the only word he could manage: "Yes." 6 months later, things looked very different. Daniel walked through the same building, but this time employees greeted him as Supervisor Carter. He still worked hard, harder than ever. But every afternoon he left the office in time to pick up Lily from school. And every night when she asked about his day, Daniel would smile and say something he never thought he'd say again. Today was a good day, because sometimes kindness doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks quietly through a hallway late at night, notices someone who feels invisible, and changes their life forever. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel Kindness for more powerful stories that remind us humanity still exists in the world. And before you go, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today?